I finally received my GH5s. This is an incredible camera with some great improvements over the GH5, but there's one thing that everyone's talking about. This camera does not have IBIS. IBIS, of course, stands for In-Body Image Stabilization. People across the internet and in my various Facebook groups have all been pretty upset about this news, saying that they won't be able to use the GH5s in handheld situations, claiming that it's only going to be useful if you have a tripod or a Ronin or a crane, some sort of high-end stabilization equipment. So what I'm going to be testing is whether or not you can get away with using lenses with built-in stabilization, seeing if this is going to be a decent alternative for not having IBIS in the camera. For these tests, I'm going to be using the Lumix 12-35 Mark II, which has become one of my favorite lenses lately. I've shot a bunch of videos with it, and I can't wait to see if the image stabilization on that lens is going to be enough to use the GH5s in a handheld situation. As with all my videos, the table of contents will be in the description, so you could feel free to jump around. But for now, enjoy the unboxing. Test 1. Panning. First, I tested panning with the GH5s, with the image stabilization set to on. The footage looks solid. I don't have the steadiest hands in the world, but the stabilization seems to be helping. Next, I did the same test, but with the stabilization turned off. We can really see a ton of micro jitters, and quite frankly, it's pretty unwatchable, even at 24mm. Lastly, I did the same test but with the GH5. The footage looks incredibly smooth. Quite frankly, it almost looks a little fake when the IBIS kicks in, but nonetheless, it's really smooth. Test 2. Holding the camera steady. For the next test, I set the focal length to 70mm and just tried to hold the camera as still as possible. With the image stabilization off, we could see a clear difference as these micro jitters just get magnified, and this footage is unwatchable. Lastly, with the GH5, we can really see the smoothness come back. Comparing the GH5 to the GH5s's shot, I'm actually pretty impressed with what the GH5s was able to do in these circumstances. Test 3. Walking with a shoulder rig. Lastly, I put the camera on a shoulder rig and attempted to walk in a straight line. I think this test holds up really well in comparison to the previous, and quite frankly, I think it might even look better without the stabilization. And lastly, with the GH5, we can really see that IBIS kicking in, making this footage look almost surreal and dreamy, which may or may not be desired. So in conclusion, going handheld with the GH5s isn't great, but if I had to do it, using a lens with the internal stabilization turned on is a decent alternative. The IBIS on the GH5 is simply incredible. I mean, you could use it in just about any situation handheld, but I can't really say the same for the GH5s. There's definitely some handheld situations where the GH5s performed, sometimes that it didn't. And if I had to use it in a pinch, I definitely would. Ultimately, I'd say if you're gonna use a GH5s, consider getting a lens with the internal stabilization. Some people out there were saying that the GH5s is completely unusable handheld, but I disagree. With a stabilized lens, you can get away with it, and I definitely look forward to shooting more videos with it in the future. Thanks for watching the video. If you're interested in getting in touch, I highly recommend following me on Instagram at MikeXGorman. If there's any videos you want to see me make, feel free to leave a comment. I pretty much respond to every comment. Thanks for watching. Peace.